Millions of frontline workers keep our economy running and are provided with the latest technology to do their jobs. But digital adoption, especially by frontline workers, is really hard.
This is Frontline Innovators. We explore how to overcome challenges and achieve success when we empower our essential workers.
I'm Justin Lake.
And I'm Gene Signorini. Together, we speak with experts who are leading the way and driving digital transformation to the front line.
This podcast is sponsored by Skillful, on a mission to help frontline workers learn and use the technology needed to succeed in their jobs. Today's guest has spent the majority of his career solving the challenges of digital transformation in the beverage bottling and distribution business. With over 17 years industry experience working with Microsoft solutions, he's been a featured speaker at various conferences such as Ignite, MBAS, and Inspire. He's currently the Enterprise Infrastructure Director at G J Pepsi, where he's responsible for all cloud platforms, support, cybersecurity, and innovation, specifically with Dynamics 365 and Power Platform. Please welcome Eric McKinney. Hey, Eric.
Hey, Justin. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for being here. I want to get right into the first question, which is, what's the biggest challenge you see facing the deskless workforce today?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, first I want to back up for a sec. I can't believe it's been 17 years. Since I don't feel that old.
Should I have left the actual number out of the intro?
Yeah. No, I was bald 17 years ago. So now, well, it's funny that does relate to the first question. When we talk about our deskless workforce or our frontline workforce, and the transformation that we've seen over the past 17 years, since I've matured in the industry, it's been eye-opening, and particularly the past decade. But we went from, and I'll speak particularly about my experience at G J Pepsi because I've been here for 13 years. And we have really enabled that frontline, or we'll call it the deskless worker or the frontline worker, and unleashed them, leveraging the tools and the capabilities that we have. And it's been an amazing transformation, and I'm sure we're going to dive into that, as we go through this podcast or this event. So, the biggest challenge that I've seen many challenges with that group, but the biggest challenges I've seen is, and it's honestly, I think it's the same challenges many of us are facing, is related to the pace and the tools that we deliver to our frontline workforce and the expectations. So I think that, for us in particular, it started really simple. We wanted you to just leverage some email. We wanted to bring you into the fold from a corporate communications standpoint, right? But then it evolved into us developing our applications, and you mentioned things like Power Apps. And once we figured we could develop our own applications at G J Pepsi, we're like, hey, let's get this in the hands of our frontline workers. And then it was, what other tools can they consume to ultimately, serve our customers? But the biggest thing is being able to leverage and get them to understand all of the tools and what they do for them. So, like, for an example, I was out on a trade visit with our service techs, who we just updated our field service solution to Dynamics 365. And as such, our service techs went from using like these old brick handhelds, and now we've got them shrunk down to a mobile phone. And the way we license people at G J Pepsi, everybody has some sort of, collaborative platform suite, Teams, email, Yammer, the whole bit, right? They have more technology than our CEO did 6 years ago for our frontline worker now. So I digress, but I'm out in the trade, and I'm talking with them, and they're like, it'd be really nice, Eric, when I'm in a work order and I see who the sales rep is, where I need to communicate with them about a cooler and where we actually want to place it, maybe where the sales rep thought they wanted it, there's some challenges. I want to talk with the sales rep. And like, can you show me how you do that in the app, in the field service mobile app? And I said, well, yeah, sure. You just go to the account, and here's the sales rep, and there they are, right? I said, but did you guys know you could use Teams to do that? Like, did you know you can actually just chat with them or do a video call or share your screen from your mobile and have this conversation with them?" And they're like, "No, no, I didn't know I could do that." And I'm showing them how they can chat, and I'm showing them how they can chat with other service techs, and they can chat with their manager and be in a group chat, and they can do all of these things that they didn't know that they could do, right? So really one of the biggest challenges, I think there's a couple, but one of the biggest challenges I see is how do we educate, a frontline workforce? And again, I can speak only about my experience at G&J Pepsi of, well over 1,200 people. We have 1,600 total employees. 75% of them pretty much work outside of our four wall, or 50% of them work outside of our four walls. How do we educate all of those frontline workers to leverage those tools to be more engaged, to help them do their jobs better, right? And ultimately, if they can do their jobs better, they're servicing our customers. Those are the ones that are out, touching the customers every day. So how are they leveraging those tools, to communicate with each other and to ultimately to serve our customers in the best way possible? Because really, that's what it's all about, right? Um, is putting it in their hands to feel, so they feel empowered, to be able, to do that. But so not only knowing, what to use and having the proper training and how to use it and for what use case are you doing it for, but just the rapid pace of change that's occurring, right? We went from Skype for Business last year to now we're on to Teams, and now there's all this capability, and now there's, field service mobile application. They just went from a brick handheld. Just making them feel included. And it's really challenging because the back office worker, right, or the worker that's tethered to their desk can make time for meetings, and they can make time to do training, and they can make time to go off to courses or whatever the case is, or shadow people. But these folks are serving our customers every day. Right, that's their job. Like you can't take a break from your customers or your core job. So how do you dedicate the time, and how do we have, the resources available, to educate them where they're at, um, outside of our four walls instead of coming in, right? And COVID's really changed that, but of course it always existed for us because again, 75-50% of our workforce never came, or rarely came into the office to begin with. So we had to develop solutions that had mobile in mind, and then, of course, it helped set us up for COVID, but that's probably for another podcast. This is about the frontline workers. So
But I think I mean, just in the introduction here, you've already kicked off a handful of really important topics. And you're right, COVID has changed the world's perspective on work, and we use terms like the future of work. But what's really been interesting, and it's almost become a hot button for me, is when we talk about all these work from home initiatives and everything else that affect knowledge workers working in an office or now maybe working from their living room or kitchen. The frontline workforce has been excluded from all of that. We still need the guys that work in your organization to drive trucks and go to grocery stores and deliver products. So
mhm.
there's no opportunity for them to do their job from home. And another point you just made is that they have already been, because of the innovation that you and your team have been leading with, they have already been prepared to now be these remote workers. And so I think that's fantastic. And I think it gives us a lot of things to talk about. What do you think? When I asked you the question about the challenges of the deskless workforce, and you talked about pace of change and their ability to do it, to adopt the technology, that's us looking out to them and our perception of their challenges. What do you think if we were to go poll a few of the guys and gals in your team? What do you think they would say is the biggest challenge that they're facing from their perspective?
I would say, I don't think it's a. They probably would say something else. That's like from our lens looking down to them. They're looking back to us, and I think they would say they want to be heard. I don't know how much of it's about the technology as much as they want their voice to be heard. We're developing the technology for them, right? But how are we engaging them to get their feedback? Like if I'm sitting in my office, right? And how do I understand, or how do our developers or our ERP teams, how do they understand what really goes on out there so that the technology can either improve what goes on out there or make their lives better out there? And I'll give you a perfect example. And I reference again a trade visit where I went out with the delivery teams. So we just they're delivering coolers, and just to give your listeners some context, they're delivering coolers or fountain units. And then we have a whole repair team, and I actually have a visit. I'm going to schedule with them now that we've gone live with their piece. But I scheduled a visit with them, met them, in the office in the morning to get their coolers loaded up onto a box truck, and I went down with them. First stop we had was down to Columbus Convention Center, so Columbus, Ohio, for your listeners. So there were two teams. They were picking up 11 coolers. They were dropping off, I think it was like 18, right down at this convention center. It's just the size of it, and that was just a fraction of what equipment we have down there. It's a really good partner of ours, the Columbus Convention Center. So. First thing I walk in, as soon as we get there, there's coolers on the dock that they need to pick up. And the first thing I notice is one of my delivery drivers has a piece of paper. So what you got on that piece of paper over there? Because, I'm thinking, hey, we just rolled out technology. Was supposed to not have this stuff, right? So what are you doing right there? He goes, the mobile app, is nice. He goes, but, and imagine it's a service application. So they have like their bookings, right, of what they need to do. And there's a booking for every cooler they're picking up or asset they're picking up. So I said, okay. He said, well, what I do is I go into each booking and then I go write the asset down so that when I pick it up, I know which booking I need to close, right? So if you imagine they're in chronological order, 9 o'clock, 9:30, 10 o'clock, right? So I said, so why, so I'm looking at him, and he's like, because he goes, well, look, he goes, this is asset. And I don't know the exact number, but it's 123, right? He goes, well, 123 might actually be scheduled. It's 8 a.m. Technically, we have it scheduled to be picked up at 11 a.m. because of the way we roll out the bookings. He goes, but I have to go into each booking and do like 3 or 4 taps to find that asset. And he goes, well, I went to 8 o'clock. I didn't find it. I go back. Went to 9 o'clock, back. 10 o'clock, back. Oh, I found it at 11 o'clock. Now I can close this booking. So aha moment was, well, we need to surface the asset onto the booking so that they know which one to go into. And the reality is they're not picking it up. The reality is there's like 12 coolers on the dock, all just shuffled about, right? And they just come to the first one and they go, yep, pick that one up, load it up. Let's go. We're going to take it, back into the truck. And I want to, even though it's 8 o'clock, the 11 o'clock is technically done. We just drag it onto the, the schedule board, or our dispatchers do. And they can rightfully close that ahead of time. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's the time they take to do that. So, I dive in, I'm running the phone for these guys. I'm doing the technology to get that mindset, and I'm observing what they're doing. And, going out and actually spending time in their element, not pulling them into a conference room with your hypotheticals and your what ifs, but actually going out and spending time with them in the trade, listening to their challenges, not even just about technical. My job as a leader in this organization is to represent not only my team, but also all of our employees, and just talking to them about, like, how's G&J, how they treating you, how's, what are the benefits like? And I would tell you, I think the frontline workers, or the deskless workers, are the ones that they would say, just being listened to. Why don't you come out and walk a mile in our shoes, right? And do our job that we do, so that you can get a better sense of the technology, and it should be out of the way. Like, I should be able to do what I need to do on the mobile phone so that, we can report to the back office folks, like accounting, for inventory and where things are, and accommodate them. But it needs to be in the background. It can't consume my work life, because I physically have to pick these pieces of equipment up. And I saw stuff like, we had a cooler that was completely smashed to bits, right? And there's glass everywhere. And I'm like, my gosh, this is like a workout. They can't be on their phone checking stuff. And, it really has to kind of be, the technology has to just serve its purpose in the background. It's all about actually moving equipment in this case. And there's different cases. The service techs, when I go out with them, it's going to be about repairing equipment. And then when you go out with the merchandisers, it's about stacking product, right? And we have technology for all of them: drivers, merchandisers, service techs, delivery folks. Like I said, we touch all 50, 75% of those frontline workers has some piece of technology. And I would tell you, if they stopped and you didn't give them if you didn't pigeonhole them into saying, what is your biggest challenge in technology? You said, what is your biggest challenge, period? It would say, I want to feel listened to. I want people to come out and spend time and help and understand our job so that you can help make it better. You're a person of influence, right? I am. How can you help me make my job better or easier, or my life at G&J better?
Shared some fantastic anecdotes, and I think the fact that you're spending time out in the field with those users to understand a day in their life, that seems to be a common theme of all the people that we've had on the podcast thus far, is really getting to spend some time outside the conference room and do the best that you can do to go spend a day in their life and really understand it. And so I think I've often thought about that mostly as a way to uncover their needs better. But you raised another topic here that I think is just being there to listen so that they feel like they're being heard. And that way, when you are asking them to adopt new technology, they don't necessarily just feel like it's something that corporate's jamming down their throat, but perhaps that they've had an opportunity to weigh into that a little bit. And I think that's fantastic. And it speaks to the way that you're handling change management inside your organization by engaging the frontline, men and women, so that they can be contributors to the process and not just on the receiving end of that. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, they feel like the solution's partially theirs, right? And you bring up an
Right.
interesting point where it's not like, corporate. It's like, hey, just go take our technology and do it.
Right.
They feel like they had a part of that solution. I mean, maybe not all, 20, 30, 40, 50 delivery folks, but at least a you know a quorum
Yep.
of those individuals can come to a consensus on what a solution looks like, along with us, along with management, along with leadership. So yeah, it helps with that buy-in. And I think that's a lesson that our team, the DTBT team, has had to learn. I think Brian Balzer, who's the VP of the department's done a great job of saying you need to get out into the trade. Our new CEO, Tim Trant, is big on that, getting out and spending time with them. Becky Wessel on our business transformation team is really, really big on that as well, is spending time on that. Her and I were on a leadership meeting this morning where she was like, hey, we got this big project we're working on, and it was good to be in the trade, not in the office, talking to drivers and managers. And she felt refreshed after doing it. Like, these are why we exist. These are the ones that mean the most, right? So
That is
yeah, it's good.
that's my favorite part of working in mobility, for with mobile technology for the enterprise is going out. I always refer to them as field trips because they are the fun days. They are the days that we get to go out and see how the world actually operates. And that's where the rubber meets the road. And so part of it is just getting to meet the men and women out there, but it's also just really understanding. I think a lot of people take for granted how things happen. We show up at a grocery store and there's an entire inventory of Pepsi products sitting in that aisle, and we
Hmm.
don't think a whole lot about what it took to get those products there. But there's a whole operation behind the scenes that's making that happen, and there's a whole bunch of people in technology that's making that happen. And so, getting out into the world to see how those men are operating and men and women are operating, and to see the impact, in your examples in particular, they're working out in the public. They've got other things to consider about public interaction, and they're dealing with a customer and they're trying to fix a piece of machinery, and so they've just got a lot going on. And then we say,
Hmm.
oh, by the way, you have to use this new piece of technology so
Right.
that we can track inventory and work orders better. And it just adds to the burden for them.
Mhm.
So I love the fact that you and your team have been spending time with them to say, how can we make this not a burden for you, but actually weave it into your day so that you can be effective and we can be effective as a company. And
Mhm.
that's pretty exciting.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
tell me about your role. Help us understand. I know we've talked a lot just about kind of getting out in the field and things like that, but I know your role is broader than that. Give us all a little background on what your role is at G and J Pepsi.
Yeah, so currently, my role as the director of enterprise infrastructure is to, you know, really I run two teams. This I call it the support and infrastructure team, which is like your traditional IT operations, and then an ERP team that's focused on like the business applications. And then in cybersecurity is weaved. I don't look at it as like right now one function. It's weaved amongst your ERP applications or your business applications, your collaborative platforms, your devices, physical security, right? It's weaved through all of that. Um, I lead two teams as part of a larger digital technology business transformation team that also includes business transformation, and then a development and data team ran by Dan Foster, who does a really good job. He and I've worked together for the better part of those 13 years, have worked together, or no, all of it actually. Um, and he's been here longer than myself. And Nathan Foster, who's my ERP manager, does a really great job. Nobody knows business applications better than him. And my job is to foster and set the direction for where we're going and ensure that those get executed on. So Brian Balzer, like I said previously mentioned, does a really good job of impressing upon like his leadership team, me, Dan, Becky, to be strategic and where we're going and set the vision for these, and I know a lot of that falls upon VP, but Brian does a really good job of challenging us to be strategic about where we're taking these, and that's where my job falls. But I'll tell you, I mean, at G&J, it's a really small digital technology team, business transformation team. We're only about 18 people. We've grown threefold. You wouldn't know it, but we've grown threefold in the past 3 years. So it used to be six. So that just shows you how much the business is invested in us, though, and believes in what we've done and what we deliver and will continue to do. But um, it's about ensuring that we are delivering the right technology to all of our employees, including the frontline. And we really value, and the things that I have to look for is integration, and working with Becky on her and her team, process and product owners, ensuring that the technology meets the requirements, and it makes it easy for our data and dev teams to move data in and out. And that, I know that we've talked a lot about Microsoft, but you know we value integration, native integration into our platforms. And if it doesn't exist, like a product doesn't exist that maybe a Microsoft doesn't do well, then we look for tightly integrated products, right? Like an LMS 365 comes to mind. Like Microsoft doesn't, natively provide a really good learning management system, but LMS 365 tightly integrates with that. And you say, well, your next question might be, at least if I was you, I'd say, hey, well, how does that translate to the frontline or the deskless worker? And I say, well, by doing so, we can do things like single sign-on. Did they have a mobile application, right? Do we make that experience not only for back office, but the front office workers who have to type in the back office workers type in a password every day. Those deskless workers don't, or maybe they don't possess a technical acumen to natively or, naturally do that. It makes that experience easy for them so that they adopt that, right? So that they can easily consume what they've done, training they've done. But that translates across all of the platforms. We're currently in a physical we call it Project PAM. It's kind of caught on, but it's a physical access management, right? It's basically your physical security badge access. How do we make that even that easier for our frontline workers, right? Do they swipe in with a mobile application? And to bring that back to what is my job is to help my teams look for those opportunities or find those, build those relationships. And of course I have budget, constraints, policies, all the stuff that comes with being an IT director and managing and leading your people. But really, I look at it as, what is the best technology that we can get for G&J that will ultimately help us serve our customers and our employees. What is the best experience we can provide with our technology for our employees and our customers is the way I would, sum it up. Like, we can forget cloud platforms and move into Azure, or whatever your thing is, Office 365, networks, whatever. My job, if you said, what is your core responsibility? How do I help my employees have the best experience and our customers have the best experience with G&J Pepsi? And that ultimately breeds loyalty and drives revenue, and help cut costs and the like.
And some of the other things that you talked about, cloud technology in general, Azure specifically, those are enabling technologies, but don't necessarily, you can still have a bad user experience for the workforce.
Hmm.
So just going to the cloud doesn't automatically enable a
No,
better, less friction, experience for those workers. So
no.
it's really amazing. For the way you describe this, your comfort level with talking about the frontline workers, it seems so very natural to you. Which is different than a lot of other folks that we talk to. And I'm curious what advice you would give to others that might be listening today about how you approach the process of building, deploying, training, and supporting applications for the frontline workers, and how that might be different from what you're doing for, the desk-bound folks inside your organization.
Yeah, well, I think, um, I'll take that in a couple parts. The first part is, I think you mentioned it was natural, and you know, I grew up um, in rural Southeast Ohio, and and G&J Pepsi encompasses the area that I used to live in.
Yeah.
These are my people, right? Like the front line people. Um, are the people that I grew up with. I love these, I love being around them. I'm probably a little more casual in my role than
Yeah.
most people do, and I probably relate more to the frontline people just because of my demeanor. Is probably a polite way of putting it. So um, I relate to them more just because of the experiences that I've had in my upbringing. And I love those frontline workers. That's the way my mom and dad were. They were frontline workers, bank tellers, and my dad ran like a body shop, or a collision repair center. And, that's all I saw was service. At the end of the day, those guys are service techs too. And, I think that speaks to why maybe I gravitate towards them. Um, I wish I had more time, my team or myself, to reach them more, to show them how technology could help benefit their work life, right? um it right now it's not as there, but from an advice standpoint, I think it goes back to really the change management and how you position that technology and what it's going to do for them. Like, what are you taking the time to say why? I think you have to be part salesman. And I don't want to pick on my fellow colleagues in IT, but there's like a stereotype that I think in some ways that comes with some IT individual, digital technology individuals and leaders, that we don't, we want to, how do I put it? We want to just stay close to our technology, right? And people. Maybe that's starting to, that's probably that stereotype's starting to go away, I think. But you have to have like a sales piece to it, right? Like, I'm trying to get you to buy into my technology, not because I say you have to have it, but why? Like, why do you, what is going to benefit this? Is it going to get you home earlier? Is it going to make you more successful? Is it going to lead to a promotion the more you adopt to technology? Maybe it doesn't lead to a promotion, but you might be seen as this really efficient individual that has higher potential depending on your role. um, Ultimately, it's here to serve the customer. Like, the technology should help the employee serve the customer, right, is ultimately, what we're about. And I know I've touched on that and it seems redundant, but you really have to sell. You have to do a good job of selling and listening to feedback. um, is how you can drive the adoption, which I think was the original question. I started talking so much I forgot the original question because took it in two parts. So, I think I think that is the key. It goes back to the 2 points that I talked about. Is they want to be heard, and you really have to state your opinion and as to why this is going on, and engage your business partners, right? This doesn't happen in a vacuum. Eric doesn't go build the technology and then go and roll it out. You need help from HR. You need help from your managers. Your managers love that you go listen to them, because if I don't listen to them, who are they're gonna bark at somebody, right? They're gonna go talk to somebody, and it's usually their managers that they feel like they got to funnel these feedback requests to. So providing lines of communication back and forth, engaging your training department, your learning development department, whether that's in HR or wherever that is, um, and getting the support from ELT that here's what we're going to do. But I'd say the biggest thing is you have to be a salesman, and you can't just take the position of just take it because we're on the same company and we invested in it, so you got to do it. um, they're not, you're going to meet resistance. You're going to meet resistance in your change management strategy if you do that.
Yeah, I think that the word resistance is actually, it was what was coming to my mind as you were describing that. And not to flip the conversation around and make it negative, but I'm curious if we were to put ourselves in the shoes of, the men and women on the receiving side of this. You mentioned briefly just about, the potential to advance and be successful in their career. But what we've also witnessed sometimes is some concerns with, anxiety. They're fearful a bit of the technology. What part do you think, anxiety and perhaps insecurities about their ability to use the technology, what part do you think that plays in the adoption of the tools that you're building for those teams?
Well, I think, it plays a large part in it, right? And this is one of the one of the good things about G and J Pepsi is that we've got a really loyal workforce. It is not uncommon for, I've been here 13 years, right? From an IT standpoint, that's, people kind of look at me like, wow, you've been at the place for 13 years. Like in IT, we kind of, the thing is we move around, right? And I kind of romanticize this place a bit. I love it, but it's not uncommon for like the frontline workforce across the board to be here 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 40. I think I saw an email about somebody had been here like 48 years at G&J, and that's no joke. I mean, we literally take you from the womb right to, to retirement if we could. But as such, a person that's been here 48 years means they started their career 48 years ago, well before any of this technology existed. You take in socioeconomic impacts of that, we're right on the edge of Appalachia. They're not as maybe technically advanced as some other parts of the country, or even Ohio or Kentucky when you're more urban areas. They didn't grow up with that technology. So that anxiety of like, hey, I don't know the technology. I don't know how to use a mobile phone, let alone an application or the processes within the application. And then there's you layer on this, um, all this talk about autonomous cars and driverless trucks. And like, is this the start? Is this the start of the end of my my job? Right? That's a skill that I know most of these individuals that we're talking about, in most cases, speaking generally, don't have, college educations. And some of these areas in Southeast Ohio, Eastern Kentucky are depressed areas, and these are really good paying jobs, which is why they stick around. And it's like, is this the beginning of the end? And if I resist, even though it might help me, if I resist, this will buy me more time for a number of reasons, right? Just that I don't want to learn it. There's always that aspect of it, but there's also that fear that comes that they're going to be replaced or outsourced by some robot or technology. When really, again, it's about the messaging. Going back to the previous question, is like, why? Like, at the end of the day, we're trying to be more efficient and we're trying to, at the end of the day, we're trying to serve the customer better. Um, and it speaks to a broader, I think vision, that I have. Like, I think, you know, one of the topics we're going to ask, I think, is about, what is if I had a vision of what, was perfect, I could describe that. But I think, um, you know, the, it goes back to saying why, and explain to it. And that fear and anxiety does play a large part of it. And we have to work to overcome that. And at the end of the day, these guys, the frontline workers, are like, man, I pick up coolers. Why do I need an app to pick up a cooler? Um, but it's about, mapping that out for all of them, and saying, hey, this helps account for the right assets being in the right places. If we know that, we don't have to buy, and I'm just speaking generally, we don't have to buy more equipment. If we don't have to buy more equipment, we can reinvest that back into business. If we reinvest that back into business, we can reinvest in you. That leads to bigger raises. That leads to, marketing opportunities where we can sell more product. If we sell more product, we need more of you. Right? Like, it's not, we're actually not trying to get rid of you with an app. We're actually trying to control our costs. We're trying to deliver more value, to our customers, and make the most out of what we have. Like, I think our organization does a really good job of recognizing our limitations, right? We're central and southern Ohio and eastern Kentucky. Like, there's only a finite amount of people that you can reach, right? We can't say, well, we're going to start going into this county and we're going to grab northern Ohio and buy that. Like, this is our franchise. This is what you got. So you either sell more products, or you got to cut costs, or get into different categories, right? And helping them realize the bigger picture, because they're not going to be thinking strategically or broadly about those types of things. It's just, I'm getting a phone and an app, and that might lead to ultimately to the end of me, because of all this, fear mongering that's going on out there with autonomy and technology replacing people. And it's really not. It's not meant to be that. It's meant to augment and help.
I think that's a common fear. And you're right. I hadn't really thought about the implications of just, the media has been talking about this a lot lately over the last couple of years. And you're right. That's probably influencing things as well. I think even before the media began talking about it, it was also something that just workers felt like we were going to automate them out of a job. And so I think the way you described that is spot on. I've witnessed that firsthand. Yet I've also been in a lot of the meetings at headquarters where we were talking about implementing new technology for frontline workers. And few, if any of those cases, the business case involved removing headcount. And so there's a gap. There's a gap between what we're actually talking about when we're planning out these tech investments and, the innovation strategies, and how the frontline workers are feeling about them. And maybe we lose sight sometimes of the feelings, right? Because we're so busy talking about the tech stack and, cloud computing and all the other, ones and zeros parts of the conversation, that we do need to bring people's feelings back into the mix. Because if the humans don't embrace the technology and realize that, net, it's a benefit for them and for the company, then, all the ones and zero stuff isn't really going to matter. And I think you've described that very well today, and how you guys have handled that inside your organization. So I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, you have to have an empathetic mindset about, like, where they're coming from, right? It's different for me delivering the technology. Like, I feel like, my job's safe, right? But no, it is. They have to realize, there's a transparency in that, right? Like, I take it like the example of this, because it's just the most top of mind, the one I've spent so much time, um, recently on, is this service platform that we just migrated to. We had like a 20-year-old solution, right? And now we're moving to a more modern solution that you would expect from a service organization, and all the things and the bells and whistles that come with that, and how that touches the customer. When you think of service organizations, and it's, I just said, how G&J is limited, and how we can sell to certain areas in this territory. So we have to be creative in terms of how we continue to find ways to grow and generate revenue, right? Not only just cut costs, but also to do that. But the platform isn't meant to get rid of any service techs or any of that thing. It's meant to enable them to do more and cut meaningless processes out, paperwork processes, or non-real-time information that they have to go hunt for. Cut all of that out so they can do more, so they can service more customers. So we could turn that potentially into like a revenue opportunity as well, to take on other things than just our own coolers, right? So the platform in itself says, hey, we're doing this to make you more efficient. By making you more efficient, we can do more. By doing more, we can generate more revenue. And then we follow down that path that I just went. We can charge more, we can hire more service techs, you're more in demand, right? It leads to raises, it leads to other things. It's all good for it's a win-win for the business, and it's a win-win for you as an individual in your career at G&J Pepsi.
It is. And I think that's something that's really left out of the automation conversation, is taking away tasks from the humans that are better left to technology, but so that the humans can spend more time doing the things that only humans can do. And I think, people that haven't been around, beverage distribution, I've been fortunate enough to go ride a few routes with some companies in your space. And, I think what people miss is that that is a customer facing role, both your grocery store and convenience store customers, as well as the general public, right? So when there's somebody out there wearing the Pepsi logo on their shirt, and they're loading product, they're out in front of customers. And so the more that they can interact with the folks at the store and make sure that they understand the needs that store has, and that you can ultimately serve that customer better, that's great. So let's take away some of those repetitive tasks from those employees, and allow them to do those things that only they can do. But I do think, as technologists, sometimes we probably don't remind them of that often enough. And maybe we're not helping resolve some of the anxiety that they have about adopting the technology. And so it sounds like you guys are doing a great job of this, but I think overall, as an in the tech space, we probably have some room for improvement on how we handle that with the frontline workers.
Yeah, well, I mean, we certainly can improve, and that's, it's always an item that's top of mind that we're talking about, business transformation team and teams. It's always, how do we engage them better? Like, we're not saying we do it great. We're always saying, well, we just did this project. How could we have engaged them better? What could we have done? Our product owner, Todd Sufer, does a really nice job on the dynamic side, asking in our Scrum meetings, stand-ups and retrospectives, what could we do better, not only as a Scrum team, but how could we have rolled out the technology better? What did we learn from it? Because our ERP journey is still going. It's going to be going for quite a few years and many years beyond that. So we always got opportunity to improve. So I don't want it to come across like we're perfect. G&J's got it figured out, but we have done a good job of delivering technology, and we always we've learned a lot over the past few years. Yeah, they have to, we have to realize our frontline workers are our biggest asset. They're the ones that touch the customer most every day.
Right. Well, I think that's the first thing, is just the mindset that you and your team have. And it's come out just a lot in just this episode so far, is your, putting them first and recognizing their value as, just as an incredibly important asset in the organization. And so then from there, everything else starts to trickle down to treating them with the same level of empathy that we might share with other members of the workforce. So that's great. Are there best practices when you talked about getting those folks trained? That's a topic that's near and dear to my heart, about when we're rolling out technology to these frontline workers, how we're actually onboarding them into the technology. So I know you've talked about a couple of things. You've talked about you going out into the fields and learning from them and seeing how they're using the technology, but I imagine that doesn't scale to your entire organization. So what best practices have you developed to make those implementations successful?
So we've done, I think when we did this, we did a really good job of engaging the managers on different levels, like using the tools that we talked about. So we get the manager's support first, right? And not going directly to the service tech, like in this, and again, I'm using the most recent example. There's countless, but it's top of mind. So we did a really good job of leveraging our testing platforms. We did a really good job of leveraging our collaborative platforms to help make that a seamless transition from as is to the to be processes and technology that existed. So as an example, you say, like, what does that mean? we would record videos instead of like paper documents. We'd actually pull up the mobile application once we developed a feature or a capability, and we would actually go and record as a development team, not handing it off to somebody, whoever developed that feature, actually going through that process on the mobile phone, and then putting it out into a channel that we have in particular teams, and then clearly labeling it, what that feature was, and then what it is. And then they could go out and leverage it and watch it as they see fit. So service techs are available to review it, comment on it. They have all of this already on their mobile phone because they've had mobile phones for 3, 4, 5 years. Just weren't using the service application. So in marrying up like what you're doing from a development side and leveraging the tools that already exist, and they leverage that through UAT, and then they provide their feedback, usually through their managers, or their managers would engage with them and go out and test real scenarios, like not pull them into a conference room. And I got to give our service team management, a big shout out. They're the ones that really engaged their workers and said, hey, I know we're using this legacy system. We're going to mock up some work orders of real things that you're doing, and we're going to go out and do those as if you were doing them in the mobile app. Even though we're not live, you could use the testing environment and then do it, and then we can get feedback and pull it back. So actually pulling in, like, make it real for them, I guess is what is the phrase I use. Let's make it as real as possible for them, not like, some fake account that we created in dev, to do our testing, and then say, we'll do that in UAT and just sit in the office and do it. Like, they were going out and doing real work before we were even live to give us feedback on how it worked. Like, offline needed to work better. We needed to sync these types of accounts versus these types of accounts. This functionality to request a part didn't work. And um, I would say making it as real as possible, leveraging, knowing what tools you have across the stack. And again, going back to the very first question we had is like delivering the content to where they are in their environment. Not saying come into the office and do it, like do it in their environment, in their van. They could sit there and do the training. And then, that ongoing training that, you know, we have new service techs, new frontline employees coming in all the time. So how do you deliver continuous training, right? And not like just pulling people in and say, hey, we're going to do this big launch in a conference room, and when everybody leaves, we're good to go, thumbs up. But knowing that these folks are going to turn over, they're going to retire, they're going to move on, they're going to get promoted, we're going to hire more. So how do we scale that, right, to meet the demands of our future opportunities?
You mentioned in the van, them doing training in the van, and I have my belief about this, but I'm really curious to get your take on why you think that's so important.
Um, Well, there's there's probably two types of training. There's like our compliance training, like fire extinguisher safety training, stuff like that. I don't know. They could do that anywhere. They could probably sit on their couch and do that. But I think when it comes to training for their job, like the tools to do their job, whether that is technical training or we're delivering through, our learning management platform, how to actually service a piece of equipment. Like, there's all these different types of trainings, is to be in the environment so that if they actually want to take that out to, the store and actually do it top of mind, right? Hey, I just saw this video of how to do it. Now I'm going to go take it and do it. Right. If they call them into the office and then they got to go an hour out to a customer site, well, maybe they lose something. They got to go back and watch it again. Right. So we're delivering the content to them, or should be delivering it to them in near real time or real time, whether that's, like I said, technical training or their physical training for the equipment they're working on or process or whatever. Then they can take it and make it real for themselves after they're done. Like, okay, I see how they did this. Now let's go do it. And that's why I think it's important to deliver it where they are, so nothing gets lost in translation and it wastes time.
You think the effectiveness of the training with this profile of worker is different when they're being trained around their peers versus perhaps being trained on their own?
Um, I think, well, yeah, I think it is. When they're, I'd have to ask them this. This is purely speculation. I don't think
Understood.
this. I'd have to actually go and ask this question. But as I think about it, like if I put myself in their shoes and I'm on my own, I'm more apt to try different things and try to figure it out because I feel like it's just me. I've got to figure out what they're telling me in here, whatever that training may be, right? Whether it's about technology or the equipment I'm working on, whatever. I'm like, well, there's nobody to bounce an idea off of. I can't kind of like, half pay attention. So I'm going to be engaged and then I'm going to go figure it out. But if I'm in a group, I'm going to be like, well, there's a couple other guys here maybe are paying attention or girls that are paying attention. I'll just kind of lazily pay attention. Maybe there's some other things on my mind. And then I'm going to kind of ask them for help on what did they learn from whatever said training is. I'm going to ask them and bounce ideas off of them. And in the process of learning, of like doing it yourself, and we call it the beating your head against the wall until you finally ram through it, you learned quite a bit before you ram through it that you really didn't intend to learn. It's sort of like the IT administrator, right? That's beating their head against the wall, trying to figure out a problem. They're using, whatever their favorite search engine is to look at blogs and articles. And then along the way to your destination of solving the problem, you figured out like 6 other things that you're like, wow, I didn't know you could do that. And then you've learned 6, 7 other things along the way that'll help you in your journey in the future and make those resolutions quicker. And I think it's the same way. Like when you force yourself and apply yourself to and dedicate yourself to solving a challenge or learning, and then taking it and doing it, you learn so much more than just kind of like, well, let me just see who else I can lean on for this one, right?
Yeah. Well, and I've heard from some folks that have conducted training classes that they feel sometimes people don't feel comfortable asking questions in a group setting.
Hmm.
You think that applies in your environment?
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, for a number of reasons that you see in typical group meeting challenges that you have, right? You always have like the 1 or 2 people that dominate the room, asking their questions and their what if scenarios and really trying to catch the gotchas that everybody wants to spend, like the one thing that might happen out of a million. And how are we going to solve that? Right? Instead of the things that happen all the time. And talking about those, there's always the wise guy or the wise girl that always kind of consume that, and they're just like, man, then they check out. And then then of course the tradition, like I don't want to look stupid. I've been a service tech or I've been a merchandiser or driver for 25 years. Like if I ask this question, it's going to make it seem like I don't know what the heck I'm doing. So yeah, of course that plays a part in it, right? And we see it all of the time. I'm not saying that there isn't a place for that. I think, when we talk about our strategy of rolling it out, it has to meet different, it's got to be an omni-channel approach, right? It's got to be videos. It has to be paper. It's got to be in person. It's got to be job shadowing. It's got to be, you got to have a omni-channel strategy in order to deliver something of the size and scope that we did most recently, or any project really, that has a fair amount of size and scope to it.
Yeah. You hinted to this before about the future of work, and I really do want to ask you about that question. You also talked about your role. You have to deal with just the real world limitations of budget and timelines and all of those kinds of things, right?
Hmm.
But I'd love to just think for a moment, if we could put timelines and budgets to the side, what would you see the future of the workforce in the context of the environment you're in today? What do you think that looks like from a technology and a human interaction standpoint?
Well, I'm glad you actually set me up with this one before, because I was like, man, I don't know how I would answer this. So just in full transparency to
Yeah.
anybody listening, like coming up with this off the top of my head would be like impossible, and because I'm not that smart. And so thank you for the time to be able to actually think about this one and answer it. And I would tell you, like if I had it my way and I could wave like my magic wand and I could do whatever I wanted, I would say I want to give back time. And I say that what's your goal? Like it's not like, well, I'd have this technology that would do all these things. My overarching goal would be to give people back time. And it's because it's our most precious resource. It's not money, it's time. And you've only got so much time that exists, right? And you don't know how much you have. And how you relate that to technology is that, and I'll try to wrap this up into a pretty bow. I might start rambling, so if I do, cut me off. But um, how I wrap this up into a pretty bow, it's really kind of a lot of what we talked about. Like, I'm big into the customer experience, right? I love I pay attention to what other companies do that don't even relate to our industry. And I'm like, man, they did a really good job, or ooh, they did a really poor job. And like, how do we do that? And the way I look at it is, everybody at G&J, when we, like, if I had my goal, like my magic wand is that everybody at G&J would be able to serve our customer, at least in some capacity. And what I mean by that is, if let's just say, Justin, you had a pizza shop, right? And we have all these people that touch the pizza shop, that serve the customer, the drivers, the sales reps. A VP could walk in and say, man, how are we doing? A CEO could walk in and say, how's G&J doing for you? And being like maniacally customer focused, and then having all of our people, all of them. If you're a guy that drives the forklift, if you're the CEO, if you're the IT dude, that you walk in and you could answer, at least in some basic capacity, and serve that customer. If they just picked up the phone and dialed a random number, you could answer most of their questions. I'll throw a number out there: 75%, 80% of their customers, right? And a real world practical example of that is, a service tech walks into your pizza shop, and you fix his cooler issue. Maybe it's not cooling. And while you're there, you ask him, and you say, well, when's my next delivery? Well, I'm not the delivery guy, right? I'm the service tech guy, right? You got to ask the delivery guy. Well, that's not a good experience. And that also wastes your time too. Right now, you got to take 15 minutes, 20 minutes to go, well, who's the delivery guy? Do I got to wait for do I call somebody? Who do I call to get that answer? Do I call my sales rep? What if they're not available? But what if you could arm every one of your employees with that basic level of information to serve that customer? That's why we all exist to begin with, right? We all exist to serve the guy. If I don't have customers to sell a product to, I don't exist as an IT guy. So I ultimately have to realize that's what I am here for. That's why the service tech is here. We should be able to, at least the technology should be, in my eyes, if my favorite thing, my magic wand, forget autonomous cars and flying cars and stuff like that. Let's talk about something that's like realistic, like right now, is that you would be able to arm anybody with base level technology to answer those questions. And if you go back to the time, right? If you say, oh, let's give it the flip side of that scenario. Instead of saying, well, I don't know. I don't know what your delivery time. I just fix coolers, man. Like, buzz off, right? You're like, well, you're a little put off by that. But what if that experience is flipped and you're like, hey, give me a second. Let me pull it up and let me oh yeah. Hey, I pulled up your account. It looks like your next delivery is Thursday. And looks like you ordered 5, 6, 7 cases of X product, right? Does that sound about right? And you're like, yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Okay. Thursday, what time? Oh, it looks like 10 o'clock. Okay. Well, I just gave you back time, right? As a customer, I just gave you back time ultimately, because you're like, sweet, I know I need to be here at 10. I know what products I'm going to get. G&J's got it figured out. And I also don't have to call now and figure all of this out, because now maybe you, as the owner of your pizza store, got to take your kid to the doctor, and your doctor's appointment's at 9 o'clock. Right. And you're like, well, I got to be back by 10, or maybe I can schedule it after 10 because I know that they're going to come and they're going to have the right stuff. Right. Because you're busy. Your job is to make pizza, not to, figure out, keep G&J Pepsi organized. Right. So my goal would be to leverage technology to give everybody back time and provide, what I would think an outstanding customer experience. And I don't think that it's not that the service tech is going to replace the sales rep's job, or the sales rep is going to replace the service tech job, or the driver is going to replace. That's not the point. The point is, the service tech, his expertise is to fix the coolers, but he should be well armed with enough information to service that customer from a most basic aspect. He probably ain't going to talk pricing and deals and promotions, but what if he could say, you know what, I'll take that, and I'm going to take that as a follow-up. And that's going to go to the sales rep. Again, I gave you back time because now you don't have to call the sales rep. You're waiting on the sales rep to call you to talk about those. Maybe that sales rep will stop by and have that meeting about it, right? And we live in a connected organization that is moving forward in a unified manner that has the customer at the center of that. And our automation, our processes, and the data that we have is delivered to the right people so that they can help serve or service the customer. And ultimately, I think that breeds loyalty, and I think that brings to us more opportunities for revenue generation, and it just snowballs downhill. If you're generating revenue and you've got the opportunities, you're hiring more people, there's more opportunities for people internally, breeds loyalty because people feel like they're part of something. And ultimately, we start with the premise that people just want to do a good job. They want to feel like they're successful out there. Like, man, they walk down, be like, man, that guy was really happy. Maybe he calls, maybe you, Justin, call the sales rep and say, hey, you know, that guy answered all my questions. He was a service tech and he answered all the questions. And if that's how G&J is going to do business, then I want to do business with G&J for another 10 years. Because when the competitor comes in and they're like, but I got this really aggressive pricing and I got this great product, and you go, but what hassle am I going to have to give up in order to do that? Right? What time? Because remember, that's what's most precious. What time do I have to give up to chase you around so that you can sell more product? And you got to make them really think about that. You have to compete on a different level, and it's not just about price and the product. You also have to think about like how make it really hard for them to think about that and say, man, what am I giving up by walking away from G&J? Make it impossible for them to do it, right? And
You know,
that's my goal, is to give all of our people that ability to serve that customer in some capacity, whatever that customer is.
well, for somebody that seemed a little unsure of how you wanted to answer that question, I think you just totally knocked it out of the park. And you've made me think about something a little bit differently, just in how you talked about the future. And we often talk about time, but in the context of making things more efficient so we can get better output, right? So that we can improve sales and reduce this time over here and increase this time over here, right? It tends to be a lot about efficiency gain because we're businesses, and that's how we run the businesses. But you just really spoke of it in a different way that made me think of quality of life. And it's not just quality of life for the employee, but it's also quality of life for the teams that support them, and it's quality of life for the customers, right? Giving them a better customer experience. So all of those check marks could have been checked. In your example, the service tech that was out there could have, still fixed the cooler, and the sales and delivery guy who came out later that week could have delivered the product. But what you just kind of talked about in your example there was really improving the quality of life for all of the people involved. And I think that ultimately ought to be an aspect of what we're doing from a technology standpoint. And so I think you actually did a really great job laying that out. And I appreciate you sharing your thoughts on that. I knew this was going to happen in our conversation just from the first couple of chances that when we got a chance to meet, that we were going to run out of time before we ran out of topics. So we're going to have you back on. I do need to wrap the show up, but
Sounds good.
really, really enjoyed the conversation and appreciate you spending some time with me and the audience today. What's
welcome.
the best way for folks to reach you to network?
Yeah, you can, I've actually trimmed down my social media. So just LinkedIn, that's about the only thing I have. So I think it's
Perfect.
just Eric McKinney, all one thing, no dots or periods or anything like that in between. It's just go to
Perfect.
LinkedIn, Eric McKinney, and you can find my profile. Happy to connect and have deeper conversations or offer advice. So just be patient
Good.
with me. I got a lot on my plate. So if I
No,
don't
and
respond either way, it's not like, hey, that guy's a jerk. He just said, reach out. So
well, and I want to just remind you, Eric, and tell the audience how I found you, because I did find that you had been written up in several case studies, specifically some with Microsoft, about the innovation that you're doing on the front lines with their technology. And so it was exciting to read those stories, and it was even better now to have you on our show and to be able to share those stories with us and our audience. So I hope that we can do this again. Let's definitely stay in touch. And as I said, it's unfortunate, but I do need to wrap it up. So I hope everybody else has found this conversation as enjoyable as I certainly have. And if so, please share and rate the podcast. 5-star ratings help ensure that it gets promoted to other professionals like you that are innovating on the front lines. This podcast is sponsored by Skillful, the mobile digital adoption platform for deskless and frontline workers. Visit the website at skillful.com. That's SKYLLFUL.com. And if you or somebody you know is out there innovating on the front lines, we'd love to hear about it. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn and share your story. And we'll see you on our next episode. Eric, thanks again for taking the time today.
Thank you, Justin. Appreciate it.
All right.